Hello. Hi.
Alien abductions, an overview. Indicators of abduction experiences. Although some abductees may recall only a single dramatic instance, when a case is carefully investigated, it generally turns out that experiencers begin to recall encounters that have been occurring from early childhood and even infancy. Indications of childhood abductions include the memory of a presence, or little men, or other small beings in the bedroom, recollections of unexplained intense light in the bedroom or other rooms, a humming or vibratory sensation at the onset of the experience, instances of being floated down the hall or out of the house, close-up sightings of UFOs, vivid dreams of being taken into a strange room or enclosure where intrusive procedures were done, and time lapses of an hour or more, Hopkins 1981, in which the parents may have been unable to find the child. Awakening paralyzed, with a sense of dread, and experiencing strange beings, or a presence in the room, are common indicators in both children and adults. Sometimes the alien beings are remembered as friendly playmates, or even healers. In the case of Carlos, for example, the abductee felt he was literally cured of life-threatening bouts of pneumonia by the alien beings. Often, the abductees feel that the aliens are protectors in early childhood, but the encounters become more serious and disturbing as the child approaches puberty. But even small children, as in the case of Colin, Jerry's son, whose history is in Chapter 6, may be terrified by the experience of being taken from their family up into the sky against their will and subjected to painful procedures. Frequently, the child will tell the parents of these encounters, which the child knows to be real, and are told by the parents that they were dreaming. They learn eventually to go underground and often resolve to tell no one until, as adults, they finally decide to investigate their experiences. Abduction experiences run in families, sometimes over 3 or more generations. Howe, 1989. Here too, the vagaries of memory, the peculiar mix of psychological defenses, and an apparent control of recall by forces that the aliens command, make it difficult to develop meaningful statistics regarding the number or percentage of relatives involved. In the cases of Jerry and Arthur, chapters 6 and 15, for example, the experiencers contacted me after a conversation with an affected sibling triggered their memory. Parents who may eventually acknowledge close-up UFO sightings, or even actual abduction experiences, often initially deny their own experiences and even their children's, not wanting to be reminded of their own abduction traumas. Sometimes children will report seeing a parent on the ship, but when the child confronts the parent with that experience, the parent may not recall being abducted. Or the reverse may occur, a parent, as in Joe and Jerry's cases, or an older sibling may recall being abducted with a child or a younger sibling, and feel deeply troubled at being unable to protect the child. Or conversely, a child may resent an older sibling or parent who may or may not recall the abduction for not protecting him or her. Although abduction or abduction-related experiences may recur throughout the experiencer's life, the pattern and timing of these encounters is not clear. Some abductees believe that they occur at times of stress or particular openness or vulnerability, but this is by no means certain. One of the most distressing aspects of the phenomenon to investigators and experiencers alike, although for different reasons, is the unpredictability of its recurrence. There are other symptoms that are tied to unconscious association with particular elements of the abduction experiences. These may indicate a possible abduction history, but are not by themselves definitive. They include a general sense of vulnerability, especially at night. Fear of hospitals, related to the intrusive procedures on the ships. Fear of flying, elevators, animals, insects, and sexual contact. Particular sounds, smells, images, or activities that are disturbing for no apparent reason may later prove to be connected with the abduction experience. Insomnia, fear of the dark and of being alone at night, the covering of windows against intruders, sleeping with the light on, As an adult, and disturbing dreams and nightmares of being in strange flying craft or enclosures are common among abductees. Odd rashes, cuts, scoop marks, or other lesions may appear overnight, or unexplained bleeding may occur from the nose, ear, or rectum, which by itself might not draw attention, but attains significance in association with other abduction-related phenomena. Other symptoms, which later prove to be specifically related to aspects of the abduction experience, include sinus pain, urological gynecological complaints, including unexplained difficulty during pregnancy, and persistent gastrointestinal symptoms. For a clinician like myself, trained in the Western tradition, the investigation of abduction cases presents special challenges, since much of the information that is obtained does not fit within accepted notions of reality. The temptation is to accept some experiences, especially those that appear to make some sort of sense within our space-time paradigm, and reject others as too far out, i.e., too far from what we know as possible from a physical standpoint. I suspect such discriminations are not wise or useful, for the whole phenomenon is so bizarre from a Western ontological standpoint that to credit some experiences because they appear, at least superficially, familiar to us and reject others on the grounds of their strangeness seems quite illogical. Furthermore, this would prematurely limit the scope of study of a phenomenon about which we know so little. My criterion, therefore, for including or taking seriously an observation by an abductee is whether what has been reported was felt to be real by the experiencer and was communicated sincerely and with powerful affect, appropriate to what is being reported. This does not mean that I have concluded that what the experiencer reports happened literally in our physical world. 3 classes of information. Applying the above framework, I have found it useful to distinguish 3 classes or levels of information. First comes what might be called the apparently literal physical level. This concerns phenomena such as the visual sighting or radar spotting of UFOs, light and sound phenomena associated with them, the burned patches of Earth that they sometimes leave, aborted pregnancies and lesions on the surface of or implants left in abductees' bodies following their experiences. These are phenomena that appear to occur within the physical universe, familiar to Western science, and can be studied by its empirical methods. The field of ufology, the sighting of UFOs, was concerned primarily with directly observable phenomena until the discovery of the abduction syndrome. Second are phenomena which look like they could be understood within our space-time universe if only we had the scientific and technological knowledge and ability to do so. These could be extraterrestrial phenomena which suggest technologies thousands of years ahead of us. These phenomena are, at least theoretically, not inconsistent with some sort of extension of the physical laws set forth by Western science. This category would include how the spacecraft get here, the propulsion systems, how they can accelerate at unbelievable speeds, virtually flicking across the sky or disappearing suddenly from a radar screen, the means by which the alien beings float people through doors, windows, and walls, the switching off of memory and consciousness of abductees and potential witnesses and other forms of mind control, the creation of alien-human hybrid fetuses seen by or brought to the abductees on the ships, and the creation or staging of powerfully vivid images of landscapes experienced by the abductee as real. For example, Catherine, Chapter 7. Although we do not understand the mechanisms by which these effects are achieved, they do not, per se, require a fundamental change of paradigm. Spectacular advances in physics, biology, neuroscience, and psychology might conceivably shed light on them. Finally, there are phenomena and experiences reported by abductees for which we can conceive of no explanation within a Newtonian Cartesian or even Einsteinian space-time ontology. These include the apparent mastery of thought travel by the aliens, and sometimes by the abductees themselves, as Paul describes in Chapter 10. Abductees sense that their experiences are not occurring in our space-time universe, or that space and time have collapsed. A consciousness, abductees experience of vast other realities beyond the screen of this one, beyond the veil, a word they frequently use. The deeply felt sense of opening up to or returning to the source of being and creation or cosmic consciousness, experienced by abductees as an inexpressibly divine light or home, another word they commonly use. The experience by abductees of a dual human-alien identity, i.e., that they are themselves of alien origins, for example, Peter, Joe, and Paul in chapters 13, 8, and 10, and the powerful reliving of past life experiences, including great cycles of birth and death. In addition, the aliens appear to be consummate shapeshifters, often appearing initially to the abductees as animals. Owls, eagles, raccoons, and deer are among the creatures the abductees have seen initially, while the ships themselves may be disguised as helicopters, or, as in the case of one of my clients, as a too-tall kangaroo that appeared in a park when the abductee was 7. The connection with animal spirits is very powerful for many abductees. For example, Carlos and Dave, chapters 14 and 12. This shamanic dimension needs further study. These phenomena cannot be understood within the framework of the laws of Western science, although, as I have indicated, they are fully consistent with the beliefs developed thousands of years ago by other non-Western cultures. Phenomenology. What do experiencers tell us? The summary of abduction phenomenology, provided in what follows, will be developed in more detail in the case examples. How do abduction experiences begin? Abduction encounters begin most commonly in homes or when abductees are driving automobiles. In some cases, the experiencer may be walking in nature. One woman reported being taken from a snowmobile on a winter's day. Children have experienced being taken from schoolyards. The first indication that an abduction is about to occur might be an unexplained intense blue or white light that floods the bedroom, an odd buzzing or humming sound, unexplained apprehension, the sense of an unusual presence, or even the direct sighting of one or more humanoid beings in the room, and of course the close-up sighting of a strange craft. When an abduction begins during the night, or, as is common, during the early hours of the morning, the experiencer may at first call what is happening a dream. But careful questioning will reveal that the experiencer had not fallen asleep at all, or that the experience began in a conscious state after awakening. As the abduction begins, the abductee may experience a subtle shift of consciousness, but this state of being is just as real, or even more so, than the normal one. Sometimes there is a moment of shock and sadness when the abductee discovers in the initial interview or during a hypnosis session that what they had more comfortably held to be a dream was actually some sort of bizarre, threatening and vivid experience which they may then recall has occurred repeatedly and for which they have no explanation. After the initial contact, the abductee is commonly floated, the word most commonly used, down the hall, through the wall or windows of the house, or through the roof of the car. They are usually astounded to discover that they are passed through solid objects, experiencing only a slight vibratory sensation. In most cases, the beam of light seems to serve as an energy source or ramp for transporting the abductee from the place where the abduction starts to a waiting vehicle. Usually the experiencer is accompanied by 1, 2, or more humanoid beings who guide them to the ship. At some point early in this process, the experiencer discovers that he or she has been numbed or totally paralyzed by a touch of the hand or an instrument held by one of the beings. Abductees may still be able to move their heads and usually can see what is going on, although frequently they will close their eyes so they can deny or avoid experiencing the reality of what is occurring. The terror associated with this helplessness blends with the frightening nature of the whole strange experience. When abductions begin in the bedroom, the experiencer may not initially see the spacecraft, which is the source of the light and is outside the house. The UFOs vary in size from a few feet across to several hundred yards wide. They are described as silvery or metallic and cigar, saucer or dome-shaped. Strong white, blue, orange or red light emanates from the bottom of the craft, which is apparently related to the propulsion energy, and also from porthole-like openings that ring its outer edge. After they are taken from the house, abductees commonly see a small spacecraft which may be standing on long legs. They are initially taken into this craft, which then rises to a second larger or mother ship. At other times, they experience being taken up through the night sky directly to the large ship and will see the house or ground below receding dramatically. Often the abductee will struggle at this and later points to stop the experience, but this does little good except to give the individual a vital sense that he or she is not simply a passive victim. There is a debate in abduction work as to whether abductions can be stopped, or even whether to do so is a good idea. Druffel, 1995. There are small variations in what is experienced during this phase of the abduction. Arthur, chapter 15, for example, described ascending to a UFO on a kind of thread-like arc that extended to the craft from the car his mother had been driving when the abduction began. Independent witnessing. Independent witnessing of an abduction does occur, but is, in my experience, relatively rare and limited in nature. As in so many aspects of the phenomenon, the evidence may be compelling, yet at the same time maddeningly subtle and difficult to corroborate with as much supporting data as firm proof would require. Husbands and wives, for example, are commonly switched off while the spouse is being abducted and have slept through the whole event. The abductee is sometimes highly frustrated when loud screaming fails to rouse the sleeping partner, who may seem to be in a state of unconsciousness deeper than sleep, appearing as if dead. Hopkins has documented a case, now being widely discussed, where a woman made an unsolicited report to him that from the Brooklyn Bridge she saw his client, Linda Cortile, being taken by alien beings from her 12th-story East River apartment into a waiting spacecraft that then plunged into the river below. Hopkins, 1992-1995. These observations corresponded precisely with what Mrs. Cortile had told Hopkins happened to her when he recovered information about a reported abduction that occurred in November 1989. This is, to my knowledge, the only documented case where an individual, who was not him or herself abducted, reported witnessing an abduction as it was actually taking place. The witnesses of an abduction, it seems, are often themselves abductees, who may be involved in the same event, raising questions about the objectivity of the observer. Sometimes, according to reports, the abductee may be noted to be missing for a half hour or more, or in rare cases for days, as in the famous Travis Walton case, Walton 1978, Tormey 1993, by family members or others. But in these instances, no one has seen them being taken into a spacecraft, and there is no firm proof that abduction was the cause of their absence. One of my first cases, a young woman of 24, told of being abducted as a teenager with a friend after midnight from the basement den of her friend's home. The girls' fathers were frantic when they could not find their daughters during the night. According to both girls, I have spoken with the other girl who confirms my client's account. The fathers checked the den during the early hours of the morning and found that the two teenagers were not there. By 6 o'clock, they were both back in the den. In another case, the 8-year-old daughter of one of my abductee clients, who has herself spoken of abduction experiences, observed her mother to be missing from her room when she looked for her during the night. The mother told me that she had had an abduction experience at the exact time the daughter told her she was missing. In the morning, the girl said to her mother, "Daddy was there and the covers on your side were turned down, but you were gone." Another client of mine reported an abduction with a college roommate from their dormitory. She said she actually saw her roommate being returned through the door through which she was taken. When the beings returned, the roommate, my client, observed her head was hanging and her hair was hanging down, and I thought that she was dead. But she herself then experienced an abduction, so that her credibility as an independent witness might therefore be questionable. Independent observation of a UFO near where an experiencer reports that an abduction took place is another kind of corroborative evidence, especially if the abductee did not him or herself actually see the craft. We will see in Catherine's case, Chapter 7, that she was shocked to discover in the media the next morning that a UFO had been observed traveling the exact route north of Boston, that she had felt compelled to drive during the night. Her drive culminated in an abduction, which took place in a wooded section of a suburb about 15 miles northeast of Boston. But Catherine never saw the UFO itself, except in the air near her car as the abduction was actually taking place. Peter, Chapter 13, reported being taken into a UFO from a Connecticut home, while 3 of his friends who were walking outside witnessed a UFO close above the house. The case is weakened by the fact that the 3 witnesses failed to check inside the house to see if he was actually missing. Inside the ships, the beings. Sometimes abductees will report being taken into the ship through its underside or through oval portals along its edge, although often they cannot recall the moment when they entered the craft. Once inside, they may at first find that they are in a small dark room, a sort of vestibule, but soon they are taken into one or more larger rooms where the various procedures will occur. These rooms are brightly lit, with a hazy luminosity from indirect light sources in the walls. The atmosphere may be dank, cool, and occasionally even foul-smelling. The walls and ceilings are curved and usually white, although the floor may appear dark or even black. Computer-like consoles and other equipment and instruments line the sides of the rooms, which may have balconies and various levels and alcoves. None of the equipment or instruments are quite like ones with which we are familiar. Miller, 1995. Furniture is sparse, limited generally to body-conforming chairs and tables with a single support stand that can tilt one way or another during the procedures. The ambience is generally sterile and cold, mechanistic and hospital-like, except when some sort of more complex staging occurs. Many more details of the inside of the ships and, of course, of the abduction processes themselves will be provided in the case histories. Inside the ships, the abductees usually witness more alien beings who are busy doing various tasks related to monitoring the equipment and handling the abduction procedures. The beings described by my cases are of several sorts. They appear as tall or short luminous entities that may be translucent, or at least not altogether solid. Reptilian creatures have been seen, Carlos, Chapter 14, that seem to be carrying out mechanical functions. Nordic-looking blonde human-like beings are seen, and human helpers are sometimes observed working alongside the humanoid alien beings. But by far the most common entity observed are the small greys, humanoid beings 3 to 4 feet in height. The greys are mainly of 2 kinds, smaller drone or insect-like workers who move or glide robotically outside and inside the ships and perform various specific tasks, and a slightly taller leader or doctor, as the abductees most often call him. Female nurses or other beings with special functions are observed. The leader is usually felt to be male, although female leaders are also seen. Gender difference is not determined so much anatomically as by an intuitive feeling that abductees find difficult to put into words. The small greys reported have large pear-shaped heads that protrude in the back, long arms with 3 or 4 long fingers, a thin torso and spindly legs. Feet are not often seen directly and are usually covered with single-piece boots. External genitalia, with rare exceptions, Joe, Chapter 8, are not observed. The beings are hairless with no ears, have rudimentary nostril holes, and a thin slit for a mouth which rarely opens or is expressive of emotion. By far the most prominent features are huge black eyes, which curve upward and are more rounded toward the center of the head and pointed at the outer edge. They seem to have no whites or pupils, although occasionally the abductee may be able to see a kind of eye inside the eye, with the outer blackness appearing as a sort of goggle. The eyes, as we will see in the case examples, have a compelling power, and the abductees will often wish to avoid looking directly into them because of the overwhelming dread of their own sense of self, or loss of will, that occurs when they do so. In addition to boots, the aliens usually wear a form-fitting, single-piece, tunic-like garment, which is sparsely adorned. A kind of cowl or hood is frequently reported. The leader or doctor is reported as slightly taller, perhaps 4.5 or 5 feet at most, and has features similar to the smaller greys, except that he may seem older or more wrinkled. He is clearly in charge of the procedures that occur on the ship. The attitude of the abductees toward the leader is generally ambivalent. They often discover that they have known one leader being throughout their lives and have a strong bond with him, experiencing a powerful and even reciprocal love relationship. At the same time, they resent the control he has exercised in their lives. Communication between the aliens and humans is experienced as telepathic, mind to mind or thought to thought, with no specific common learned language being necessary. Procedures. The procedures that occur on the ships have been described in great detail in the literature on abductions. Bullard, 1987, Hopkins, 1981, 1987, Jacobs, 1992, and will be summarized only briefly here, although many of them will be described in detail in the case examples. They might be categorized as of two sorts, physical and informational. The abductee is usually undressed and is forced naked, or wearing only a single garment such as a t-shirt, onto a body-fitting table where most of the procedures occur. The experiencer may be the only one undergoing the procedures during a particular abduction, or may see one, two, or many other human beings undergoing similar intrusions. The beings seem to study their captives endlessly, staring at them extensively, often with the large eyes close up to the humans' heads. The abductees may feel as if the contents of their minds have been totally known, even, in a sense, taken over. Skin and hair and other samples from inside the body are taken with the use of various instruments that the abductees can sometimes describe in great detail. Instruments are used to penetrate virtually every part of the abductees' bodies, including the nose, sinuses, eyes, ears, and other parts of the head, arms, legs, feet, abdomen, genitalia, and more rarely, the chest. Extensive surgical-like procedures done inside the head have been described which abductees feel may alter their nervous systems. The most common and evidently most important procedures involve the reproductive system. Instruments that penetrate the abdomen or involve the genital organs themselves are used to take sperm samples from men and to remove or fertilize eggs of the female. Abductees report being impregnated by the alien beings and later having an alien human or human-human pregnancy removed. They see the little fetuses being put into containers on the ships, and during subsequent abductions may see incubators where the hybrid babies are being raised, as do Catherine, Jerry, and Peter among my cases. Experiencers may also see older hybrid children, adolescents, and adults, which they are told by the aliens or know intuitively are their own. Sometimes the aliens will try to have the human mothers hold and nurture these creatures, who may appear quite listless, or will encourage human children to play with the hybrid ones as, for example, Catherine is made to do. Needless to say, all of this is deeply disturbing to the abductees, at least at first, or when the material first surfaces. Their terror may be mitigated somewhat by reassurances the aliens give that no serious harm will befall them, and by various anxiety-reducing or anesthesia-like means they use. These involve instruments that affect the energy or vibrations, words that abductees often use, of the body. These processes may greatly reduce the abductee's fear or pain and even bring about states of considerable relaxation. But in other cases, they are incompletely successful, and terror, pain, and rage break through the emotion-extinguishing devices used. As I will document in detail in several case examples, the traumatic, rape-like nature of the abduction material may become altered as the abductees reach new levels of understanding of what is occurring, and as their relationship to the beings themselves changes in the course of our work. In some, the purely physical or biological aspect of the abduction phenomenon seems to have to do with some sort of genetic or quasi-genetic engineering for the purpose of creating human-alien hybrid offspring. We have no evidence of alien-induced genetic alteration in the strictly biological sense, although it is possible that this has occurred. Information and the alteration of consciousness. The other important related aspect of the abduction phenomenon has to do with the provision of information and the alteration of consciousness of the abductees. This is not a purely cognitive process, but one that reaches deeply into the emotional and spiritual lives of the experiencers, profoundly changing their perceptions of themselves, the world, and their place in it. This information concerns the fate of the Earth and human responsibility for the destructive activities that are taking place on it. It is conveyed by the direct mind-to-mind telepathic communication referred to above and through powerful images shown on television monitor-like screens on the ships themselves. The information may begin to be conveyed when the abductees are children or adolescents. See Arthur, Chapter 15, and Ed, Chapter 3. But its implications are not fully understood until much later. The investigator seems to play an important part in enabling the abductee to bring forth and realize the significance of the information they have been receiving during abductions that have been taking place over many years. Scenes of the Earth devastated by a nuclear holocaust, vast panoramas of lifeless polluted landscapes and waters, and apocalyptic images of giant earthquakes, firestorms, floods, and even fractures of the planet itself are shown by the aliens. These are powerfully disturbing to the abductees, who tend to experience them as literally predictive of the future of the planet. Some abductees are given assignments in this future holocaust as it is displayed, such as to feed the survivors, or are told, as in the prophetic books of the Bible, that some will perish while others will be taken to another place to participate in the evolution of life in the universe. Some abduction researchers believe that these images are not shown for the purpose of altering the course of the planet's history in a positive way. Rather, they maintain the beings are studying the experiencer's reactions and are deceiving them into believing that they are concerned with our fate while they proceed to take over our planet, their own having presumably been destroyed by an apocalypse of science and technology, similar to the fate that might befall us. Various Personal Communications, 1990-93. Also Scott, Chapter 5. They argue further that if the aliens were truly concerned with our well-being, they would manifest themselves more forthrightly and intervene directly in our affairs in order to make things better. Abduction experiencers report that the aliens themselves, when confronted with this issue, say that we are not ready to acknowledge their existence and would treat them aggressively as an enemy as we do anyone or anything different from ourselves that we do not understand. But most importantly, the aliens say their methods are different. Some abductees report that the aliens do not wish to bring about change through coercion, but rather through a change of consciousness that would lead to our choosing a different course. Some abductees receive information of battles for the fate of the Earth and the control of the human mind, between two or more groups of beings, some of which are more evolved or good, while others are less evolved or evil. The abductees usually report fewer details of their return to Earth than they do of their abduction. Usually they are returned to the bed or car from which they were taken, but sometimes mistakes are made. They may be returned quite a distance, or even miles, away from their home. This is rare, and I have seen no cases of this kind, although Bud Hopkins has told me of such instances. Smaller mistakes are more common, such as landing the experiencer facing in the wrong direction on the bed, with his or her pajamas on backwards or inside out, or with certain garments or jewelry missing. Sometimes the aliens seem to be making a point, or a certain humor is involved. One 2-year-old among my cases was tucked into his bed tightly after an abduction, which the parents say that neither they nor his older sister had done. He, of course, was incapable of doing this. Hopkins tells of a case where 2 abductees were returned to the wrong cars. As they drove along the highway, the drivers recognized each other's cars. They were re-abducted and returned to the appropriate vehicles. Personal communication, December 1992. After the abduction, the experiencer may have varying degrees of recollection of what occurred. Sometimes what happened will be remembered as a dream. The abductee may wake with unexplained cuts or other lesions. The mucous membrane was reported cut into and tissue taken from inside the nose and under the tongue in one of my cases. Small lumps under the skin, a headache or nosebleed. Generally, experiencers are quite tired afterwards and feel as if they have been through some sort of stressful experience. Physical aspects. The physical phenomena that accompany abductions are important, but gain their significance primarily in that they corroborate the experiences themselves. For the effects tend to be subtle and would not by themselves convince a Western-trained clinician of their meaning. For example, even though the abductees are certain that the cuts, scar, scoop marks, and small fresh ulcers that appear on their bodies after their experiences are related to the physical procedures performed on the ships, these lesions are usually too trivial by themselves to be medically significant. Similarly, abductees will often experience that they have been pregnant and have had the pregnancy removed during an abduction. But there is not yet a case where a physician has documented that a fetus has disappeared in relation to an abduction. Druffel, 1991. Miller and Neal, 1995. Neal, 1992. Many abductees have noted that electrical or electronic devices, television sets, radios, electric clocks, telephone answering machines, electric lights and toasters, malfunction in relation to abductions or simply when the experiencers are nearby. But it is almost impossible to prove that these disturbances are related to the abduction process or even that they have occurred at all. Abductees are frequently convinced that some sort of homing object has been inserted in their bodies, especially in the head but other parts as well, so that the aliens can track or monitor them, analogous, the abductees themselves will observe, to the way we track animals with various devices. These so-called implants may be felt as small nodules below the skin, and in several cases tiny objects have been recovered and analyzed biochemically and electromicroscopically. MIT physicist David Pritchard, who has also been analyzing an implant that came out of a man's penis, has written about the criteria for examining and determining the nature of such objects. Pritchard, 1992. I have myself studied a 1-2 to 3-4-inch thin, wiry object that was given to me by one of my clients, a 24-year-old woman, after it came out of her nose following an abduction experience. Elemental analyses and electronic microscopic photography revealed an interestingly twisted fiber consisting of carbon, silicon, oxygen, no nitrogen, and traces of other elements. A carbon isotopic analysis was not remarkable. A nuclear biologist colleague said the specimen was not a naturally occurring biological object, but could be a manufactured fiber of some sort. It seemed difficult to know how to proceed further. There is no evidence that any of the implants recovered are composed of rare elements or of common ones in unusual combinations. In discussions with a chemical engineer and other experts in materials technology, I have been told that it would be extremely difficult to make a positive diagnosis of the nature of any unknown substance without having more information about its origins. Under the best of circumstances, it would be difficult to prove, for example, that a substance was not of terrestrial or even human biological origins. If, in fact, these objects were actually left in the human body by alien beings, which would be virtually impossible to prove, it would not be difficult for the aliens, in light of all the other, to us, seemingly miraculous things of which they appear capable, to adapt a small object to the human body by forming it along the lines of the body's own chemistry. If that were the case, the analysis would yield nothing unusual. This was actually my experience in the case of Jerry, Chapter 6, who felt strongly that 2 small nodules that appeared on her wrist following an abduction experience had not been there before. She agreed to have these removed by a surgeon colleague of mine, but the pathology laboratory found nothing remarkable about the tissue. There was considerable excitement among abduction researchers when the first implant was discovered. Here, at last, would be the concrete physical proof of the reality of abductions. A real object recovered from the alien world, the smoking gun that would silence the critics. I am not now so sanguine that the phenomenon will reveal itself in this fashion. To hope so may even be a sort of error of logical types. In other words, it may be wrong to expect that a phenomenon whose very nature is subtle, and one of whose purposes may be to stretch and expand our ways of knowing beyond the purely materialist approaches of Western science, will yield its secrets to an epistemology or methodology that operates at a lower level of consciousness. The point is made in Eva's case, Chapter 11. Because of the relative thinness of the physical findings, however genuine, a heavy burden of evidence for the reality of the abduction phenomenon falls upon the reported experiences, or witnessing of the experiences themselves. A theory that would even begin to explain the abduction phenomena will have to account for 5 basic dimensions. These are: 1. The high degree of consistency of detailed abduction accounts, reported with emotion appropriate to actual experiences told by apparently reliable observers. 2. The absence of psychiatric illness or other apparent psychological or emotional factors that could account for what is being reported. 3. The physical changes and lesions affecting the bodies of the experiencers, which follow no evident psychodynamic pattern. 4. The association with UFOs witnessed independently by others while abductions are taking place, which the abductee may not see. 5. The reports of abductions by children as young as 2 or 3 years of age. See Colin in Chapter 6. Clearly, no explanation that addresses all of these elements is apparent at the present time. Impact and sequelae of abduction experiences. Needless to say, abductions profoundly affect the lives of those who experience them. These effects are traumatic and disturbing, but they can also be transforming, leading to significant personal change and spiritual growth. Whether this transformational element is intrinsic to the abduction phenomenon itself, dependent in part on integrative therapeutic work with the investigator, or is a byproduct of coming to terms with the traumatic nature of the experiences, is one of the questions that will be explored in this book. Trauma, the traumatic aspect, has 4 dimensions. First are the experiences themselves. To be paralyzed and taken against one's will by strange beings into a foreign enclosure and subjected to intrusive, rape-like procedures, some of which are especially humiliating to human dignity, is obviously highly disturbing. In this light, it is surprising that abductees as a group are not more emotionally troubled than they are. Second, abductees experience a lifelong sense of isolation and estrangement from those around them. Whether or not they recall consciously many elements of their experiences, abductees feel that they are somehow different or other, that they do not belong in this society, even if superficially at least, they seem to get along well. As children, they have commonly been told that the abduction-related events they describe are dreams, or even that they are lying, so experiencers learn to keep these matters to themselves and feel very much alone with their experiences. One savvy 8-year-old abductee looked at me incredulously when I asked him if he told his friends about his encounters, which he was able to distinguish sharply from dreams, even when they had to do with UFOs. "No, I don't tell anybody that I don't know that well," he said. "I just don't want them to know that I have encounters. I think that a lot of people I know get scared if they hear scary stories. I guess people are like, hey, that's too weird." This boy is, in fact, popular with other children and his teachers, and they find nothing unusual about him. As adults, too, abductees learn not to talk about their experiences, except under trusting circumstances, knowing that they are likely to be met with skepticism and false interpretation, if not outright derision. Third, abductees experience what I have called ontological shock, as the reality of their encounters sinks in. They, like all of us, have been raised in the belief that we on Earth are largely alone in the universe, and that it would simply not be possible for intelligent beings to enter into our world without using a highly advanced form of our technology and obeying the laws of our physics. Abductees tend to persist in the hope that a psychological explanation for their experiences will be found, even when they tell me that what has happened to them is as real as the conversation we are having. Finally, abduction-related traumas are unusual in that they can recur at any time. Most traumas, such as war-related experiences, rape, or childhood abuse, are finite. They occur and then are over, even if they persist during a given period of time. But abductions are unpredictable, and their recurrence in an individual's life follows no foreseeable pattern. Parent abductees will commonly first seek to investigate their own experiences when they discover that one or more of their children are having abduction encounters. The discovery that they cannot fulfill their protective responsibilities as a parent will breach their denial and motivate them to confront their own buried experiences so they can be more helpful to their children. In addition to these specifically traumatic long-term effects, abductees may also suffer from a number of long-term symptoms that, though subtle, they relate to their abduction experiences. These include various fears discussed earlier, such as of hospitals and needles, as well as symptoms such as headaches, nasal sinus pains, limb pains, gastrointestinal and urological gynecological symptoms, and disturbances of sexual functioning. Jerry, Chapter 6. It is somewhat ironic in view of these pathological sequelae that so many abductees have experienced or witnessed healing of conditions ranging from minor wounds to pneumonia, childhood leukemia, and even in one case, reported to me firsthand, the overcoming of muscular atrophy in a leg related to poliomyelitis. It is interesting that not all abductees experience the intrusive, traumatic procedures that have come to be seen as characterizing the phenomenon. For example, Arthur, Chapter 15. I do not think this is simply a matter of resistance or denial. Some individuals seem to be selected primarily to be instructed, even enlightened, a kind of reprogramming, as one woman puts it, by beings that are usually of the subtler or luminous sort. Perhaps these individuals, who seem to have spiritual leadership qualities, have a different consciousness, are more fearless, more willing to be out of control and move through their terror than other abductees. It is a question that deserves further study. As will be discussed in several cases in this book, an abduction history can place a great strain on a marital or other intimate relationship. This is especially the case when one member of the couple is an experiencer, and the other not only evidently is not, but finds that he or she cannot accept the reality of the spouse's experiences. Relationships are also disrupted when one member of the couple undergoes significant personal development, directly or indirectly resulting from their experiences, leaving the spouse more or less behind. Ava, Chapter 11. Transformational or consciousness. Altering aspects. I will devote more attention in this book to the transformational and spiritual growth aspects of the abduction phenomenon than has been the case in other literature on the subject. There are several reasons for this decision. First, I believe that this feature of the phenomenon has either been neglected or has been viewed as incompatible with the traumatic dimension of an abduction as it has most often been described. Second, it is my impression that this largely unresearched area is of considerable significance. Finally, and most interesting, I think, is my personal experience as a psychiatrist dealing with abductees. I seem to receive more information of this kind in my work with abductees than apparently do other investigators. It is not altogether clear why this is so. Perhaps my caseload is pre-selected, biased in the direction of individuals who, in seeking the help of a psychiatrist, deepen their understanding of their experience through exploration of their consciousness. Possibly abductees sense that I am open to hearing about experiences or information that might be considered too far out for most investigators, and my own personal evolution may, in fact, have made me more open to the information they are seeking to convey. In any event, I try to be as scrupulous as I can not to lead clients in any particular direction, so that if information that is relevant to the spiritual or consciousness-expanding aspects of the abduction phenomenon emerges during our sessions, it will do so freely and spontaneously and not as a result of specific inquiries of mine. I will briefly outline the types of experiences that could be placed in this category. Of overriding importance is the shift that needs to occur in the relationship between the experiencer and the alien beings before consciousness altering information can be received. Although the relationship with the aliens may have been playful, even intimate in early childhood, it tends to change to a more disturbing and traumatic one as puberty approaches and the reproductive hybrid project begins. As traumatic intrusions take place, the abductees tend to feel themselves to be victims of hostile beings who regard them coldly, or simply as specimens in a project that serves the needs of the aliens. They may feel betrayed by the alien beings as the nature of their interaction changes. But as our work deepens, especially as the power of this extraordinary alien encounter is acknowledged, and the abductees come to accept their lack of control of the process, the frightening and adversarial quality of the relationship seems to give way to a more reciprocal one in which more mutual human-alien communication can take place. The abductees may even experience a profound love for the alien beings, in some ways more powerful than the love they experience in human relationships, and may feel that this love is returned. Connection through the eyes seems to play an important part in the evolution of this process. Whereas, for example, the abductees felt bitterly resentful about having their sperm and eggs used by the aliens in the hybridization project, they may come to feel that they are participating in a process that has value for the creation and evolution of life. There are those who might argue that such a shift in stance by the abductees in the face of the ongoing helplessness of the abduction situation is in fact a defensive shift, even self-delusion in the service of mitigating pain and distress. It could be considered an attempt by the ego to retain a sense of mastery by giving away voluntarily what will be taken by force, or an attempt to reduce cognitive dissonance by believing that the emotional cost of such a traumatic experience can be balanced by providing something good and positive for the universe. On the other hand, it is possible that working through the shattering experience of the abduction may give abductees access to experiences of transpersonal meaning, universal love, and connectedness that make such compassion possible. As is true of so many aspects of the abduction phenomenon, it is difficult in the area of transformational or spiritual growth-related experiences to separate cause and effect, or even to think in causal terms at all. Does an abductee, for example, receive and communicate information about a past life experience because his consciousness is open to the possibility of such matters? Or will the emergence into consciousness of the memory of a past life, itself facilitated by our work together, bring about an expanded personal horizon and a broadening of the sense of self in relation to the larger fabric of universal consciousness? The fact that the relationship between the abductees and the aliens can evolve so dramatically over time makes me question categorizations of the beings into constructive, good and loving ones, and others that are deceptive and hostile, bent on taking over our planet. The idea that the light beings are good or caring, for example. The greys are businesslike and indifferent. This kind of taxonomy smacks suspiciously of the sorts of polarization that characterizes human group or ethno-national relationships and could have little to do with the way interspecies or interdimensional relationships, if their actuality were to become established, might work beyond the Earth. Furthermore, it is common for abductees to experience, for example, both light beings and little greys, Arthur chapter 15, or reptilian and other sorts of beings, Carlos chapter 14, during the same abduction. It is possible that we are dealing with relationship processes that are evolutionary in nature and not comprehensible in the linear terms of our familiar polarities. Types of experience during abductions that appear to be related to personal growth and transformation are as follows. 1. Pushing through occurs, i.e., fully experiencing the terror and rage associated with the helplessness and intrusive instrumentation on the ships. When this takes place, acknowledgement and acceptance of the power of the experiences becomes possible, and a more reciprocal relationship follows in which personal growth and learning can take place. From the ego death follow other levels of transformation. 2. The aliens may be perceived as intermediaries or intermediate entities between the fully embodied state of human beings and the primal source of creation, or God in the sense of a cosmic consciousness, rather than a personified being. In this regard, abductees sometimes liken the alien beings to angels, or other light beings, including the greys. 3. The abductees may actually experience themselves as returning to their cosmic source, or home, an inexpressibly beautiful realm beyond, or not in, space-time as we know it. When this occurs during a hypnosis session, powerful, inexpressibly joyous, even orgiastic feeling occurs. Conversely, abductees may weep with sadness when they experience having to leave their cosmic home, return to Earth, and become embodied once again. 4. Past lives are experienced during the sessions with strong emotion appropriate to what material is emerging. This is most likely to occur when the investigator picks up on cues in the sessions during which encounters from infancy are being re-experienced. Complaints or simply observations of being here on Earth again, of being back or having returned, are voiced, about which I then inquire. The past lives that emerge seem to have relevance to the personal development or evolution of the experiencer, as I have seen in the cases of Dave and Joe. 5. Past life experiences provide abductees and the investigator with a different perspective about time and the nature of human identity. Cycles of birth and death over long stretches of time can thus be relived, providing a different, less ego-derived sense of the continuity of life and the smallness of an individual lifetime from a cosmic perspective. Consciousness is experienced as not coterminous with the body. The notion of a soul with an existence separate from the body becomes relevant. 6. Once the separateness of consciousness from the body is grasped, other kinds of transpersonal experiences become possible. Identification of consciousness with virtually endless kinds of beings and entities through space-time and beyond often occurs. Paul, chapter 10, among my cases, for example, found himself during our sessions identified with dinosaurs or dinosaur-like reptiles from another era and experienced himself present at the site of a UFO crash several decades ago when alien beings were destroyed by human fear and aggression. Another abductee, a young Brazilian man, found that his alien encounters opened him to the identification with the myths and spirit entities of his culture's folklore, from which his Western scientific and intellectual training had cut him off. 7. A distinct but important aspect of this kind of transpersonal experience is an abductee's sense of possessing a double human-alien identity. In their alien selves, they may discover themselves doing many of the things that the other aliens have done to them and to other human beings, such as studying their minds or even carrying out reproductive procedures. The alien identity seems to be connected in some way with the soul of the human self, and one of the tasks the abductee then confronts is the integration of their human and alien selves, which takes on the character of a re-ensoulment of their humanity. 8. The reliving of abduction material leads abductees to open to other realities beyond space-time, realms that are variously described as beyond a veil or some other barrier which has kept them in a box, or in a consciousness limited to the physical world. When asked about these experiences, abductees have trouble finding the words to describe what has occurred and speak of the collapse of space-time, of the non-relevance of the notions of space and time, and of being in multiple times and places at the same moment. The result of all these experiences for abductees is the discovery of a new and altered sense of their place in the cosmic design, one that is more modest, respectful, and harmonious in relation to the Earth and its living systems. Emotions of awe, respect for the mystery of nature, and a heightened sense of the sacredness of the natural world are experienced along with deep sadness about the apparent hopelessness of Earth's environmental crisis. One of John Carpenter's cases described herself as having become a child of the universe after she had become conscious of her abduction experiences. The meaning and implications of these shifts of consciousness for possible human futures will be discussed more fully in the case examples and in the concluding chapter. The 13 cases presented in this book, 8 men and 5 women, were selected from the 76 abductees I have interviewed on the basis of the following criteria. 1. Their stories, although in some instances complex, seem to me sufficiently clear to permit a coherent narrative. 2. Each case appeared to illustrate in depth one or more central aspects of the abduction phenomenon. 3. Each person was willing to have his or her story told, with or without the use of his or her actual name. 4. I knew these individuals quite well, but there are abductees I have known longer or worked with in greater depth. If I have chosen not to tell their stories here, it is because I could not do justice to the richness of their experiences in a sufficiently clear and concise manner. The sequence of cases reflects generally a kind of progression from simpler stories to more complex, multidimensional narratives. The last case suggests what the abduction phenomenon may hold for the transformation of our institutions and collective lives.